We are the gym that teaches people how to move instead of just exercise, because we believe that health is about performance, not just body image.
Like Vasquez said in Aliens, let's rock. If you're new to the tribe, Rad is across the table, Rich is behind the mix. My name is Yanni Bormeister, and we are Unity Gym, experts at turning driven people into athletes. This episode is brought to you by the Unify Movement System, the online program that balances strength, flexibility, and fitness in an efficient 60-minute workout so you can unleash your inner athlete. Get daily coaching by us, plus our epic gym and home UMS programs, extensive exercise library, private coaching group, and weekly group coaching calls. As a valued listener, use the link in the description to get your first month free. Before we get started, big warm welcome. If you're watching on the Unity Gym YouTube channel, remember to hit that like button. The more likes we get, the more legends like yourself get to see and hear this content. And always, as always, subscribe if you like what you see. I'm excited to announce that joining us today, we have Phil White from ADPT Physio.
Yeah, and if you didn't know, his name's not actually Phil White Physio. It's Phil White, but he is a physio. And Phil started work in the fitness industry back in 2012. He was first as a remedial massage therapist. That's where we met him. And then he went on to study exercise sports science and a doctor of physiotherapy, a postgraduate degree. Now he runs ADPT Physio, where they specialize in delivering the athlete rehab experience to everyone. And he is good. Phil's been a massage therapist to the GWS Giants AFL team here in Australia, to Olympians, Paralympians, and a number of other professional athletes. Good to have you on the show today, Phil.
Yeah, stoked to be here. The podcasts are always my favorite part of the day. So yeah, I just love talking about this sort of stuff. And yeah, for people who have questions, keep them coming, because I love this.
And I just have to say, one day I aspire to have somebody introduce me on the podcast the way that we introduce Phil. But you know, one can only dream.
Yeah, I'll get you next time.
All right, this episode is brought to you by Helen Madge. Helen has asked the question: if doing cardio and strength, should you always do strength first, or does it depend on your goals? Example, if it is to actually run a marathon, should cardio come first? And Helen is a member of the UMS Online Coaching Group. So, why don't we throw this one over to...
Can I start?
Yeah, Phil.
Nice.
Yeah.
Love that. Yeah, I got really excited when I saw this question, because it's been a passion point for me, because I've always been sort of on the team sports cardio side of things, and coming into the gym was a really wonderful experience for me, getting past a whole lot of injuries that I'd had during my 11 years of playing international level ultimate frisbee. That really kind of ended my frisbee career, and I just thought I'd take a season off, try doing a bit of strength training, really improve my injuries, but then kind of went down the rabbit hole and got stuck there for a while. But more recently, I sort of got back into team sports and back into triathlon. So since going from like into the gym with the Unity guys and doing some powerlifting, now I've started to train for a half Ironman. So that's about as cardio as you can get. And so it's been really kind of fun and interesting challenge of trying to figure out how to optimize both developing strength, maintaining injury kind of prevention strength, while also really trying to up my cardio. So this is something that I've been kind of getting a bit obsessed about and going into the science behind it. So yeah, really excited for this one.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, and we've all and before you dive into the science, we've all got a bit of a personal view on this, because Rad has gone very deep into martial arts, and I've gone very deep into boxing. And I think the same, what we're going to talk about today, could essentially be argued for any sport that you want to specialize in. You know, the way that you prioritize your training, the way that you structure your training split. You know, because we've had high-level jiu-jitsu athletes come to Unity Gym, and you know, when you start to work with people that are very specific about wanting to perform in a certain sport, you do have to sort of change the training split, because the two aren't always sort of done in unison. You know, one will affect the other, and so you know, what we talk about today doesn't necessarily have to be applied to someone who wants to do a triathlon or that wants to run a marathon. It can kind of be applied to anyone who wants to compete high level at a sport, unless, you know, the sport is weightlifting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think if you don't overthink it and you just want to be a bit fit, like you want to be pretty fit and you'll be strong and flexible, just follow the Unity program as is and you'll get a great result. But certainly I love that you're hitting on something really good here, Helen, with asking about goals. Did you want to jump in before I?
Very quickly,
Yeah,
because
please.
I love what you've said there, and it is a little bit of a shameful plug, but I just want to I want to point out just to anybody that doesn't know, before Phil goes deep into his belief on this and the science behind it. The reason why at Unity Gym we do a 10-minute mobility warm-up, then 30 minutes of primary workout focusing on strength and flexibility, finishing with a cardio circuit, is because we want a balance, but a balance means that we want to make people as strong as possible, as safely as possible. And what we've found is that if you try to do that same strength training session after you've done a high intensity interval training session, there is no chance in hell that you're going to lift as much weight, which means it will affect your strength potential. Whereas if you do a high intensity interval training session after you've done strength training, you might be neurologically fatigued, but you can still flog yourself cardiovascular wise and get a good response with cardio.
And it's more complementary.
Yeah. So just wanted to say that really quickly.
And the UMS program is about creating a foundation of strength, flexibility, and fitness that you can deploy into any sport really effectively. And you know, we try not to specialize in anything, because we want people to be able to come through the program who are ready to go and take on the world afterwards, you know, but that doesn't mean that the UMS is going to make you the best soccer player or the best marathon runner. At some point, you will have to do specific training for the sport.
It won't even come close. If
Yeah.
you were to perform, if you did the UMS and then went and did a triathlon against, or a half triathlon against somebody that was training for a half triathlon, you wouldn't compete against them. But you would most likely be able to do a half triathlon and also play a full ultimate frisbee game and fare pretty well in both without getting annihilated. But
Just tough iron, man. Just to pull you up on the terminology there. But yeah,
all right,
100%.
Phil, let's
agree.
hear
So
your
yeah,
thought.
first up, Helen, I'm stoked that you've kind of got the right answer off the bat, which is yes, it will definitely depend on your goals if you're looking for optimal performance. So that's you've clearly been paying attention, and definitely the goals are going to be really important. That's going to bring us up to say it depends, which is the classic answer to most questions when it comes to human body and performance. So yes, it's going to depend on your goals, but the other thing I want to just point out quickly is that it might not always be the same for all times of the year. So your goals might change throughout the year, or you might have one big goal that means that you have a certain event that you're coming up for at a certain time of year, and that means that to optimally get to that period, you might have periods where you're going through a real strength phase, similar to athletes when they do a kind of classic pre-season before their team sports, and they'll put kind of strength as the overriding priority, and therefore probably, you know, if they're doing 2 training sessions at once, they'll do the strength, and then that will change as they get closer to the event. So I just wanted to point out that with all of this, it's always going to be if you really want to take it to the most extreme sort of optimal depth of this, then it can also then depend within a year within that sport, and that's where periodization training is the secret sauce to successful athletic development. But to talk about a bit about the why you'd be considering changing this up is that basically, you do get this, the technical term is concurrent training, so where you're trying to get 2 different sort of fairly separate adaptations. And there definitely is interference at play. And interference is basically like when we think about when we want to get stronger or fitter, we're going to stress our body in a certain way. And then that stress plus rest and recovery will equal an adaptation if that stress is within, sensible, challenging bounds, but not, not totally overloading. And then that adaptation will happen if there is recovery and if there is adequate energy and fuel for the body to then utilize and either put down more muscle fibers, change the fiber type, or to lay down like the cardiorespiratory changes, like your mitochondrial density for fitness, or changing the way that how much blood your heart can pump with each pump. So there's kind of all these different adaptations that will happen specifically to the type of training you give it. And if you go really hard on both of these stimuluses at once, then you're basically going to not allow full development of those changes. So just to try and make that clear. So if your you've done all this hard strength training and then you go straight into doing some really hard cardio, like endurance cardio, then your body's kind of getting this like mixed signal, and also you won't have that chance, like that rest and recovery to lay down those that expensive sort of new muscle fiber. And yeah, you kind of get that like effect of you start to overtrain rather than get these optimal changes. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. And sorry, I just want to say, you know, it's really important that people take into consideration like the macro, big picture life journey, you know, when they're deciding how they want to train and all this sort of stuff, because I'm a huge proponent of maintaining the ability to go for a run and the ability to do certain things, good cardiovascular fitness, both on an aerobic and an anaerobic level. But the thing that people don't often take into consideration until it's too late is the importance of the maintenance of strength. And the reason why I'm saying this is because it's really, really nice to fantasize about doing a marathon or a triathlon or this or that. But when you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, you have to take into consideration what is going to be affected if you do that. And is it worth it in the end? You know, because you can be really fit and healthy and not run a marathon, you know. Because running a marathon at the age of 40, like I see this a lot, and I've had a lot of clients do this, where they decide, I need a radical intervention to get myself back into shape, and they choose, and it's great. You know, we're really big proponents of choosing something that you can motivate yourself to do and have a means to demonstrate it. But at 50 years old, to train for a marathon, you're going to lose a lot of muscle. Like there's just very little way of avoiding that. You know, you have to do an immense amount of cardiovascular training. And if you're not dieting really well, if you're not doing a bit of strength training to try and hold on to your muscle tissue, you're going to lose a fair bit of muscle tissue to get your body prepared to be able to run that distance. It's just not efficient to carry a lot of muscle
Yeah, well, you
tissue.
point out there that if you continue doing strength training throughout marathon training, which we'll get to in a second, like that can definitely help maintain a lot of muscle there, but we'll get to
and that's
but it takes time.
But then on the flip side, unfortunately, you're not going to be an elite level marathon runner if you're doing a lot of strength training. The two just interfere with each other. So you got to kind of say, okay, am I doing this because I would just like to have that achievement and milestone ticked off? And if then that's the case, don't try to become a professional elite level marathon runner, because that's going to that could potentially have a negative impact on your overall health long term. Do it from a recreational standpoint and go, okay, my goal is to get this done, feel really great about myself doing it, but come out of it healthy at the end, you know, because you can, like, if you're like me, you get very, very enthusiastic and passionate about competition and competing. And I've just seen this a lot where I've had people come and work with me afterwards to try to regain their health after going down the rabbit hole of like a really elite level event like that. And it's very hard to do so after the age of sort of 50 or 60 years old. You know?
I actually really enjoyed the chat that we had with Aaron the other day, where when we were training out there, it wasn't what we did on the podcast in here, but we did a moving podcast, I guess, where we were all just doing a little bit of movement out there and chatting. And he was talking about the idea of, you know, after the age of 35, really, if you don't touch it once a week, as in just give it a little bit of attention, you lose it. And it's not really like that in our experience before the age of 35. Like I remember being 30 and the things that I would do with Kung Fu, like acrobatic type movements, I wouldn't do them for 6 months, and then I'd just have a little go and I could play around with it. And when I started trying to do that after the age of 35, I just couldn't even jump anymore. Like I was so surprised. My brain knew how to do these acrobatic movements, but I couldn't jump off the ground because I hadn't done it for so long. And so the idea that you would not have, like if you're in your 40s or 50s, that you haven't done something for so long and that you're just going to come back and do something at that higher level is a flawed approach, I think. And then if we tie it in to Helen's question, should cardio or should strength comes first? Well, it depends on what you want to achieve, but just make sure that those goals as you get older are in alignment with not just what you want to achieve in 2 or 3 months, but where do you want to be in the next couple of years? Where do you want to be for the rest of your life? Because all of these decisions with the ways that you impact your training, that they do start to have a bigger effect on the quality of your life, you know, as we get a little bit older.
Yeah.
Yeah, which Phil hasn't enjoyed the feeling of yet, because you're still,
So
how old?
35. I'm 31.
31, yep.
Yeah.
You just wait.
It's coming.
Yeah. Look, that's all I would sort of.
Well, what's Phil got to say? I can see him.
Yeah,
trying
so
to
basically
chime in
now
here.
looking at like with what goes first and why. So for me at the moment, I'm doing, as I said, all this training for the half Ironman, which is pretty solid endurance stuff. So if I was to try and fit 2 sessions within a day, I'm going to prioritize. Like if I was to do, remember how in other podcasts we've talked to Team Taji about having that like idea of you want to have hard days and easy days, hard days and easy days. And so we want to think that like when we're having rest, we want to have really good quality rest and recovery. And that so that might mean that I'll do very low intensity, like conversational, like I can still have a conversation while I'm running or on my bike, really low level stuff on the easy days. And then when I'm doing harder training, I'll do like a hard like sprint or interval sort of session or hard threshold work, which is basically like running at race pace on those hard days. Now, with then trying to add strength into it, you wouldn't want to do that before you're then doing your hard stuff. So basically it's like you're trying to bank all your fatigue in one go and then having like a good amount of chance to properly recover, because it just gets, if you start trying to do all of it at once all the time, you just get into this kind of gray zone of because you're no longer fresh, you can't push yourself and you can't get to that sort of higher level to then keep adapting and getting stronger. Now it does become really hard there, where if you're trying to do hard interval stuff and then you're trying to do hard strength work, it's just not going to happen. So that's where that kind of longer term periodization comes into it. And so when I'm doing my strength work after a harder cardio session, it's nowhere near as high intensity as what I would otherwise nowhere near as high a load as I would have done in the gym. A lot of it's been body weight, single leg sort of stuff, just building up sort of strength endurance. So you just really can't kind of match them together. And since been getting back into the gym, I've started doing just like solid strength training by itself, standalone, because I still want to like maintain that strength. Because when you can maintain strength, the reason why it does improve your cardio performance is because if you say my arbitrary numbers here, if every step I take when I'm running is 20 kilos of 60 kilos of force, if my 1RM on my single leg same muscle, same arbitrary thing is 120 versus 100 kilos, that's a much lower percentage of each contraction. So being stronger does help you, because you can then basically become fatigue resistant and keep the system strong, so you're not going to injure yourself. So chucking that in strength work is important, but yeah, you just want to think about interference and how can I separate my hard sessions as much as possible so you get a chance to adequately recover. So,
and what do you, if we take away all of the science and all of the research, and if we really simplify it down, for me, back when I did martial arts, there's something that stuck with me right through my training, which was I was always taught whatever you want to get better at, do that first. Mm-hmm. And generally speaking, when it comes to martial arts, that is skill work. So work that requires actually trying to develop a skill, timing, movement, before you do the really fatiguing endurance type work that comes in martial arts. Because if you do martial arts and I did Kung Fu, if you do a really hard workout, they're really endurance-based workouts. They're quite intense, they're quite long. And by the end of it, you're just so glycogen depleted, and it's really, really hard to, even
neurologically fatigued.
Yeah.
As well.
And then to try to like in martial arts, that a lot of this, at least in Kung Fu, some of the skill work is acrobatic type work. If I tried to do that in that state, there's just no chance. Mm-hmm. So you do the thing that you really want to see improvement in first, and then you move on to it. Now, then you move on to
which is usually the more complex.
Yeah, that's right.
Of the movements.
But so then if you look at the idea of why would you want to do cardio before strength, my personal opinion is you'd want to have a really good reason as to why cardio is that much more important to you to either building or maintaining strength. And I'm not saying that it shouldn't be. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, in my opinion, I think you should have a very, very solid reason as to why that would be, because I still do believe that you can perform quite well doing cardio as your secondary part to strength training, whereas we've all just spoken about our experience with you just cannot do a really good strength training session if you've just done a decent cardio session first.
Now, very quickly, because I want to try and get this into the discussion, there was a post either in our UMS Online Coaching or Movement Mastermind about a couple of weeks ago from someone who was,
I'm pretty sure it was from
dropping a new research study in suggesting that cardio before resistance training enhances.
Well, it used the words might enhance, might increase strength potential or something. If you do 20 minutes of jogging before strength training, it might increase.
Can you, Richie, can you have a scour of was it in the coaching group?
Yeah, but no, it was in the Movement Mastermind
In the
group.
Movement Mastermind. Can you have a scour for that? Have a look through and see if we could bring that up.
And what are your thoughts on that, Yanni? What did you
Well, I
want
wanted to see, look, like everything that I've ever learned, and that's through the influence of other people, other experts, whether they be bodybuilders or professional powerlifters or weightlifters. I've done weightlifting, Olympic weightlifting workshops and things like that. It's always the same that, if you go and belt yourself in cardio, you're going to fatigue the central nervous system, and the central nervous system is required to be fresh for weightlifting. And so you're not going to be able to lift as much weight, which is one of the key components of the development of strength and or hypertrophy,
But it can also...
I think this is a trap that so many people fall into, and it's something that I've been seeing a lot with patients as well, who are coming in because they're getting injuries. And it's something that I've really had a huge turnaround in my own in thinking since I've started doing this half Ironman training, and that is that people really undervalue low intensity cardio. They always think if I want to get fitter or if I want to lose weight, then I have to be belting myself doing either threshold, so that race pace, or above, with interval work to get any effective weight loss or cardio increases. But there's just so much benefit to your cardiovascular system by doing that really low intensity stuff. And what's great about it is it then also won't leave you neurologically fatigued, so it won't interfere quite as much, and it'll build up impact tolerance and strength around your joints if you do it really well, and if you can fit more of that in a low intensity and not have so much carryover. And so with that, and with maybe this program about training, doing cardio before weights, there is no chance that would have been high intensity cardio before, unless it was for 2.5 minutes, maybe.
Yeah, that's right. And you know what else, Phil? My personal experience in talking about low intensity cardio. So I've recently made a change. I used to ride an electric scooter to work, and I've recently got rid of that because bloody cops pulled me over and told me I couldn't ride it. And so I'm now walking to work every day, and it's about a 15-minute fast-paced walk.
Solid hill.
But I intentionally walk up the steep hill. So there's the fork in the road where I can either go up Blues Point Road or I can go up. And so it's a good hill that's probably about maybe 200 to 300 meters long. And by the time I get to the top of that, I'm dripping with sweat. I'm not out of breath, but my heart rate is elevated. My breathing rate is faster. And I am fitter now from just doing that daily than I was when I was riding my scooter to work. And that it's not even close to high intensity. I get to work and I could immediately go into a full workout from it. So it really does help.
So a kind of way of, as I said before, conversational pace while you're doing it, being able to breathe through your nose is a good one of keeping you at a low enough intensity, because it's really uncomfortable if you start doing that. So this is about
a few times, and
this is about different aerobic thresholds, and basically as you start to go into those higher aerobic thresholds, then you start to use glycogen as a fuel source, and you start to get that higher intensity stuff, which will probably be a bit more interfering. And another way of being able to find these thresholds as well is when you're your first threshold is basically where you start to breathe deeper but not faster, and that second threshold is basically where you start to breathe faster as well. So if you can be doing the cardio in between that level of you're breathing deeper but you're not breathing faster, then you're probably in that sort of sweet spot of it's going to be great for your cardiovascular health, it's going to be good for load tolerance throughout your whole body, but it won't be interfering with your training. So if you did want to do either that kind of before, a bit of cardio before you trained, then keep it at that intensity and not for huge duration. But as a recovery, it's also quite a nice way of staying fit but not interfering with your strength, as long as you're fueling appropriately.
So first and foremost, I just want to make a mention, because it's really important. I found the post, and unfortunately I can't read it because I'm not a subscriber to the New York Times. But there's a very big difference, and I'm just trying to find. I may have found the study. I've found the study, so I can actually have a look at it. When you read an article in a newspaper, you're relying on the interpretation of an author, of a journalist, which is very, very...
And keep in mind, people who are writing for papers are often trying to get something that people will click on.
Exactly. They want
absolutely.
clickbait, and so first and foremost, usually you're not reading an interpretation from a sports scientist. You're reading an interpretation of a sports science journal by a journalist.
Yep.
And so it's very, they will play with words.
Yep.
They will do
Should be
things that
taken
will
anecdotally. And,
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
At most, it should probably trigger your desire to want to look further into it, but it should certainly not be something that you should read and go, oh wow, this is something to take.
And so this is talking about 20 minutes of cycling may improve.
And this is really interesting because the article in the New York Times says cycling or running, and they've used a picture of a run. But when I look through the article journal here, it is very specifically cycling.
Yeah.
Which is they just change little things to suit their paper or whatever. So that's the very.
I think we
first
should
thing.
watch out going down the rabbit hole with this. I think we should really just leave the idea on that when you read an article, just be aware that it is exactly what we've just described.
This is really important because they're saying here high intensity leg cycling alters the molecular response to resistance exercise in the arm muscles. So they're talking about stimulating lower extremity to train upper extremity.
Which I'm sure that if there are further studies conducted on that, what you'd probably find is what the catalyst for that is really just increased blood circulation before strength training.
Yeah,
really.
Why you do
which
your fairly active.
Exactly, which can be done in many different ways.
Yeah.
So
and then also it's important to note that they're talking very specifically about muscular hypertrophy, not the development of muscle strength.
yeah, which is you train very differently for it.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway.
Awesome. Well, look, thanks so much for everybody for tuning in and listening. And if you want to connect with Phil can be found on Instagram at ADPT Physio, and you can book in for an in-person session with him or an online session with Phil at adpt.physio. So that's not adptphysio.com, it is adpt.physio. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Phil. It's always a pleasure having you on here with us.
Yeah, I really enjoyed talking about it. Cheers.
Yeah, good topic. And we'll see you all for the next episode of the Sound of Movement podcast.